so excited to welcome Ryan Wekenman. Did I
That was
pronounce right?
that was perfect. Nobody gets
Yeah.
that perfect. And you, yeah, that was a home run.
Wow.
Well
Oh my
done.
gosh, I'm telling you, people say I still have an accent, but I'm starting to wonder.
Yeah, that's right.
Ah,
Well done. Yeah.
well, welcome to God Size Stories, Ryan. So excited to talk to you.
It's an honor to be here. I love this space. I love everything you're doing. And so thanks for letting me jump in here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, I connected with Ryan through a friend and Michelle. I'm sure you'll be hearing this. Michelle and I served together at Passion Conference 2025, and we really connected on an incredible level. We were intercessors during that conference, and I was talking to her about this podcast, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I have just the person to talk for you to talk to," and I'm so excited, Ryan, because
Yeah.
I have never interviewed anybody on this subject
Yeah.
and this is the fourth season. So I have to say that singleness in the Christian world has to be a subject that needs to be explored more because I received so many reviews for books for to review, and I've never. Here's his book, Single Today, and the subtitle is Conquer Yesterday's Regrets, Ditch Tomorrow's Worries, and Thrive Right Where You Are. Ryan, you are a singles pastor
Mhm.
and a singles man.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So
A
I'm I'm
single man,
just
sorry.
I'm just single. And I happen to be a pastor, right? And to your point, especially early on in my time as being a single pastor, it was like I couldn't talk to anyone about it and nobody wanted to talk about it. And the only thing like out there resource wise was from really well-meaning pastors who got married, like 20 years ago and are like talking about like what they wish they knew when they were 18 before they got into a relationship at 19 or whatever. And that's great. And I like am very thankful for them. But I just found myself really wanting to glean some wisdom from people who have actually been single. And so that put me on a long journey of a lot of conversations and a lot of research and a lot of prayer. And along the way, I started to realize that all throughout the Bible, specifically this guy named Jesus, and the Apostle Paul, like singleness is all throughout there.
Yes.
And so yeah, to your point, I was like, man, we need to be talking about this more. And so I've
Yes,
been
yes.
I've been talking about it.
I'm so grateful you are. Let me tell you a little bit of my experience, and then that's why when she started telling me about it, I was like, I want to know more about this because I didn't come to the Lord until I was 25 years old.
Hmm.
I had been in a relationship for 4.5 years, and but before I met the Lord, and I wasn't married, but it was a long-term relationship, and so I find myself at church at 25 and understanding that people get married much earlier than like in the world in the Christian church. It seems like at least back in the day. That's 30 years ago,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So like it was me and one more girl in the entire church that were single over 25, and yeah, and there were no such thing as single adults at the time, at least not in Brazil.
Hmm.
I, um, and so I ended up starting together with my married friends that were my age, a group that was called Young Professionals for Christ, welcoming married couples and singles couples. But I'm telling you, I remember this feeling so like, I am like so behind in so many ways. I don't know Jesus and I should be married, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That feeling that you're falling behind. I think every human
Falling
feels
down.
it, but when you're single, it's this like extra pressure where you can't stop. Like every birthday, you're like, well, so and
Yeah.
so was married at this age, and now I'm this age, and I'm still not married, or I still
Yes.
don't have a date, or I still don't have kids, or whatever it is. I feel like I'm falling behind that line. Every single person, every single person listening to this will be able to resonate with that
Yes.
line. I know that
And
feeling.
yeah, and one of the reasons also that this is dear to my heart is that some of my dearest friends today, they are single women, never been married before.
Mm.
And I know that they are content in the Lord for the most part. They are, but I know that there's that peace in their hearts that, that I believe that they're going to so benefit from this book and our conversation. So, first of all, we see a lot of books, right, Ryan, on dating relationships, but you decided to write a book on singleness. So tell me, there has to be I know that the motivation is some of your experience. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah,
how it came about.
it turns out it's a lot less marketable to write a book on singleness than a book on dating. I had to learn that the hard way. Um, because it's just the book is just the realest book I could think to write about how I feel about all of this because I've always been so content being single. Now, what I say in the book on the first page is that is true about 82% of the time. I think sometimes people throw me into this category of like, well, he says he's content being single, and so he must like never have any desire to be married, and that's not true. There are lots of moments, specifically when like I hang out with my niece and my nephew, and I drive home. I always drive home thinking like it would be really fun to have kids, you know?
Yeah.
Or like when I see like a couple who have been married for decades, you know, and they're like still dancing, and you see like they know each other so well and they've been through so much together. Like that's a really beautiful thing to me. And so I certainly have moments where I'm like, oh, I see it. I see the value in it. I see why it would be this amazing thing. It's just that for me, that desire has never been strong enough to really pursue it. And I mean, the right situation just hasn't happened yet. And so
Mhm.
I've found myself all through my 30s being single. And what I've realized is when you're single, there is so much opportunity to learn, and we usually jump right past it because we take the subject of singleness and we go, yeah, it's all about like how you can meet somebody, you know? And I wanted to write something different where it's like, or we could stop and see that being single is actually a sacred time and that the Lord has something really beautiful for you in this time of being single. And so, yeah, that's where the book begins of we're not going to get so caught up in the past and the future. We're going to learn how to be single today.
Contentment, right? Contentment in every season.
Mm.
I experienced after knowing the Lord. I was single for 5 years. I didn't get married until I was 30. I met my husband 2 years after I got saved, but he lived in America and I lived in Brazil, so we would see each other every 6 to 8 months. We met in Brazil, but anyway, long story. But I really was single for 5 years, and I agree with you. There's just so much goodness that can come, and I experienced this early on. Um, that the Lord wanted me to make Jesus my all, during that time that I was single and waiting.
Mhm.
And this book that you wrote is about confronting some of enemies of singleness, right? So you specifically uh, mentioned two enemies of singleness. So tell us a little bit what they are and why did you decide to write about them?
Yeah, great question. So this is from having hundreds of pastoral meetings with single people over the years. I realized one day that all of the struggles with singleness really fit pretty nice and neat into one of two categories, um, which is yesterday and tomorrow. And so these are what I call the two enemies of singleness. Yesterday meaning the past. It's replaying and ruminating on mistakes from the past. It's overthinking, like, well, I had this opportunity, but I can't believe I said that, or I sent that text, or I didn't pursue her or him at that right time. And now they're engaged. And now I feel like I just messed up God's plan for my life. And like, how like that spiral can happen. It's all stuff that's not happening anymore. It's stuff from the past, that I believe Jesus gives us a really sweet invitation to let go of, and to, like it says in Second Corinthians, he took him who knew no sin to become sin, that we may become the righteousness of Christ, which means wherever you are listening or watching this from right now in this moment, you put your faith in Jesus, the old is gone. And the new is here. And so the first third of the book is all about how to do some of the work to confront that stuff from your past, how to give it a name and allow yourself to actually feel it, and like name the emotion and feel the emotion so that you can actually learn to let it go. It's about learning how to have safe people in your life that you can talk to about, like, hey, here's what happened back in 2008, and I can't stop thinking about it, and I want to tell the story to somebody. All of that stuff, when we don't name it, it ends up just kind of laying dormant in our soul somewhere, and then it ends up coming up usually through like anger or like different unhealthy ways. And so the first third of the book's really a deep dive into the past, into yesterday, into the first enemy of singleness. But that's only the first enemy. The second enemy is tomorrow. It's the future. It's, am I going to be single for the rest of my life? It's, am I running out of time? It's, are all the good ones going to be taken? It's all of the games we start thinking about. I call it the tomorrow trap of, like you'll be going throughout your day, having a nice Tuesday afternoon. And then suddenly before you know it, you're thinking about 3 years from now, and you're stuck ruminating and overthinking the future. And meanwhile, Jesus says things like, don't worry about tomorrow. Right? Be here today. Who's somebody in your life today? How can you love your neighbor today? How can you love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength today? And so part two is all about learning to loosen our grip on our fear of the future and be present today. And then finally, the last few chapters are get really practical and talk about what it looks like to just be fully present while being single today. So those are the two enemies of singleness, and how I like to try to help people combat them.
I love that. And I think that all of us, if you were single for a long period of time, if you're still single, I am sure you can identify to that. You know, there's a lot of regret, sometimes shame, right?
Yeah.
That for things that may have happened in the past that you have allowed to happen, and you get stuck there. And it's so important. And it doesn't matter whether it's about singleness or anything in your life. You can get stuck in the past, and Jesus is just telling you not to worry. Well, first of all, past is there, is where it belongs. It should be where it belongs. You know, Jesus has dealt with that, and let's just take care of today.
That's
Right?
right. Yeah, there's so much freedom in that, but it's not easy.
No.
And the book doesn't shy away from my own struggles. And I talk very like openly and boldly about my own ups and downs with singleness. And so, yeah, don't hear me say like, you can just combat the two enemies and then you'll be fine. Like it's a process. And so the book's a deep dive into that process.
Yes, well, that's all wonderful. So I think that this is pretty interesting story. That the whole book idea started when your HOA sent you an email about a neighborhood pool closing down. That was
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Tell us about that a little bit, and what does that have to do with the subject? Because I think that that's pretty
I need to
interesting.
I need to send a copy of the book to my HOA and thank them for that email.
There you go.
It was during it was 2020, so it was during the pandemic. I got an email from my HOA that just said the pool will be closed until further notice. And that's all it said. And uh I like to run in the morning, so I run past the pool every morning. And for the first few weeks, I kept thinking like, what, I can just jump the fence. Water's water. It's fine. Like I'm just gonna go swim and no big deal. But about a month into it, the water started to get this like green tint to it. And by month two, it was just a swamp. It
Yeah.
looked like algae everywhere. Like it smelled awful. It was like you expect to see like frogs jumping around in it because it was just gross, right? And I was thinking throughout the mornings as I was working on this book, I would run by it, and I thought, um, that's what happens to stagnant water. when it just sits there, because before the pool was closed, there were people that would come by and add chemicals, and they would stir up the water, and they would clean it, and they would make sure that everything's staying fresh. But once the pool closed, they just left it. And so that water sat dormant for months, and stagnant water turns into a swamp, and swamp water stinks. And so the illustration for me is that's what can happen to our own soul. It's like if our soul is a body of water, it's really important to continue stirring it, and continuing to clean it and to process and all of that. And when you're married, that can be I think one of the reasons marriage is God's idea and marriage is such a beautiful thing is because it's another person in your life who helps stir the water in your soul, and you're doing the same for them. Just as like simply as asking them about their day and hanging out with them and dreaming together and processing and moving forward. When you're single, you don't necessarily have that. And what I've noticed in my own life and in certain seasons is it's really possible to let that water get stagnant, where every day starts to feel like a less exciting rerun of the day before. And
Mhm.
if you're not careful, you just start like eating the same food, and even if something as simple as like having the same haircut and wearing the same thing and doing the same thing every single day, as the life just kind of slowly starts to leave you. And so what I noticed is single people don't necessarily have somebody in their life who's helping them stir that stagnant water. And so much of the book is me asking the question, well, what about us? Well, what about when you're single? Because the truth is, you can stir that stagnant water up. You just have to be more intentional about it. You need to be more intentional in prayer about it. You need to be more intentional in finding community and getting people around you who are going to help ask the questions. And so, yeah, a lot of that book, a lot of Single Today is my invitation to when your soul starts to feel like a stagnant swamp. How do we get that water stirring again?
I like that. And you were talking about one of the things that you were talking about, like in the regrets of the past, people that got away, in the book, you also talk about this game that you and your friends come up with. It's called The Ones That Got Away. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that may be a good game for people to play.
Absolutely, yeah. So the ones that got away, it came from a trip that me and 3 of my friends went on. We went on a year-long trip. We were doing mission work, and we had a whole bunch of downtime with this was, like, before phones, and so there was, like, no way to entertain ourselves. And so our entertainment became we all made lists of relationships from our past, and it wasn't even relationships from our past. Sometimes it was like someone you wanted to pursue and you never did. Anything that like had a story along with it. We made a list, and then we would just go around in the circle whenever we had like a layover, and the next person up would tell the story. And it at first was just like a fun game, but then along the way it became this like incredibly freeing exercise that we call the ones that got away, where you talk about things that you just haven't ever talked about, and insecurities, that you've never vocalized, and regret that you have, and shame that you've held. And there's something about doing that in community where it's like turning the lights on in a dark room. And so, yeah, that's what we did. And in the book, I talk a little bit more about how to do that and how it was so pivotal for all of us.
Were you all single? All of them single?
We were all single at the time. One of them was in a relation. So yeah, 3 of us were single. One of us was in a dating relationship,
Mhm.
um, that is now his wife, and the 2 others got married like pretty quickly after coming back from the trip. And so it was really cool. It was like the Lord allowed us to work through some of the stuff that we needed to work through in order to get us ready, get them ready for marriage, and get me ready to be content being a single person.
You made a point now that to me is very important. When I look back now, the years that like everybody was getting married around me or married, having children, and I was still single. I remember looking back now that I see now being married to my husband for 25 years, how much the Lord was actually working in me and in him. You know, that there were some things that definitely God was just preparing us for each other. And this is a point that's important. Some people will end up not getting married. That will be not be God's will for their lives. But some people, the singleness should be a time of preparation, right? Like preparation of self, and for to be the husband or the wife that God has designed you to do. So what are some of the things you, as a single parent, a single pastor, I'm sure you have many people who are single who are on serious relationships or engaged, but still under your leadership. What are some of the things that you tell them that are important during this time of waiting? Um,
Great question. So first off, just so we're clear, I'm a huge proponent of marriage. And so one of the first things I tell them is it's great. Like get out there and meet people and be proactive in your singleness. Um, and there's I think a misconception that God's just gonna like bring the person to you. And I call this airport theology, where they're just gonna be like holding a sign. You know, when you walk out of an airport and there's somebody like with your name on it?
Wouldn't it
Um,
be nice?
yeah, it would be so nice, right? Because then it would eliminate all the work and all the mystery and all this the scary moments and the
Yes.
fear of rejection and all that. It's just not how it works. Um, and so the first thing I tell people is like, if that's a deep desire of yours, it's beautiful, and I'm cheering you on, and go be proactive in it. But then I also, when it comes to waiting and wilderness, the Bible has a lot to say about those seasons. Um, Unfortunately, those seasons in the Bible tend to last a lot longer than we wish they would. Like I'm
Yes.
thinking about the Israelites and 40 years in the wilderness, or even Joseph being in an Egyptian prison for 2 years or whatever it is. Um, the seasons of waiting and wilderness are oftentimes where God's doing the most profound work in our lives. And we miss that when we just want to like hit the eject button and get out of it as soon as possible. And so while it's kind of a paradox, I want you to be proactive and I want you to pursue, but I also want you to not rush your way out of the time of waiting. And by that I just mean don't like be active and pursue it, but don't force it.
Mm.
Don't settle for something that's less than God's best for you just because you're tired of being alone. Um, so I think that you can worship while you wait. Um, I think that you can work while you wait. Yeah, I think you can fix your eyes on Jesus and learn how to be a disciple while you wait. And so, yeah, that's the biggest thing is I just get kind of sad when I see people like wasting their singleness. And I go, this
Yeah.
is like such an important, pivotal, beautiful season of life. Like, let's
Yeah.
not waste it.
And for us married, I will tell you, even though I'm married to the love of my life and I've been happily married for 25 years, sometimes I'm like, that was such a sweet time, and it's not that you miss it, but it's like that precious. It's precious to be like your own, the owner of your time, and you make your own days, not a kid that's pulling on your skirt saying "mama, mama, mama, mama," and you cannot you cannot go to the bathroom for
Yeah.
like a decade at least without somebody calling you, and then
Um,
it's just it's special. You should understand it, that there, as the Bible says, there's a season for everything under the sun, and if God wants you to get married, he will send that person to you, right? Or you, as you pursue your path
well, it's
will
both, right?
cross.
Totally.
Uh-huh.
It's both. And
Yeah.
I love that point. I think it's so spot on that there's so many benefits that come with being single. And my experience has been most people don't see that until they're no longer single.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. As a matter of fact, so funny because yesterday my husband and I, he always picks on me when we're watching TV. I don't know what is it that he said. Oh, if I die, you get married right away. I'm like, no. Like I was single for 30 years, and I really have been blessed with a good marriage, I would not be looking for, I'm not afraid of being single. And I think that I don't want to, but it's something that people should understand, that there's a reason why the Lord is allowing that, and you should embrace it, as you said. And I love that you're helping people see that, with your book. But one of the things that you repeat throughout the book, it's you use this sentence, I don't care, I think that means you care. So
Mhm.
tell us the story behind that line. And it can be a powerful tool for singles, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is one of those tools that I use all of the time. It comes from a story um, where I was about to preach on a Tuesday night at this youth group, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's a mentor, and we were talking just about spirituality, and then this young like freshman girl ran up to us, and her opening line was, "My boyfriend just broke up with me, but I don't care. He said he wants to see other people, but I don't care." And then she ran off just like that. And so Sally and I were left like just laughing, like that's like there was no small talk, there was no setup. She just said that line. And then Sally goes, I don't care, I don't care. I think that means she cares. And
Right.
then went off to go talk to her, and go follow up. I've held on to that line for so long, where it's like we spend so much energy trying to convince ourselves that we don't care about things. It's usually the things that we're trying the hardest to pretend like we don't care about that we actually care deeply about. And so when it comes to doing this in internal work, especially as a single person, but this is true of anybody, um, what is the fear that you need to confront? It's probably the thing that you're trying really hard to convince yourself you don't care about. What is
Mhm.
the shame that you need to heal from? Probably the thing that you're trying to convince yourself really hard you don't care about. And so, for me, I've just learned I don't care. I've learned to see that as a signal. It's almost like the check engine light is coming on, and there's something beneath the surface that I actually do care about. And it's a really
Very
just
true.
helpful tool. You know what I mean? Does that
Very, very
resonate?
true. Very, very true. I agree. Because if you don't care, you really don't have to say that you don't care, and
Totally.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. You'll know you don't care anymore because you'll stop saying I don't care, and you'll just stop thinking about it.
isn't that the truth? Yes, 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 yes. Well, I love that. It's a good indication for sure that somebody cares. And
Yeah.
but you one of the characters that you use throughout the book, and I love her, Mary of Bethany. So you use her. You tell the story of Mary of Bethany. Tell us why you chose her. I know why, but why you chose to tell her story, and what lessons that you personally have learned from her life.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love telling Bible stories, and the Apostle Paul was like the on the nose example of if you're telling a book about singleness, like write about the Apostle Paul. But I just kept gravitating towards Mary of Bethany, who we don't know, but there's no mention of a husband for her, at least in the Gospels. And so it seems in that time that she was single, and she has three interactions with Jesus. And one day I was reading all three interactions, and I realized like that's all three of those interactions are really the framework of the book. Um, the first one is the famous one about her and her sister, Mary and Martha, when they host Jesus.
Mhm.
And Martha's running all around trying to make sure the night's great, and Mary's just sitting at Jesus's feet, which in the first century was a rabbi's way of saying like, "Hey, I want you to come follow me." And I would
Mhm.
imagine in that moment, there was certainly a whole bunch of fear and a whole bunch of feeling inadequate, feeling unqualified, all feelings that I have felt in my own life of like, really? Jesus wants me to go and be his disciple? Like, I'm like the last person that should be doing that. And so what I see in that moment is Jesus really giving her a sweet invitation to let go of the past and to realize that today is a new day and he's calling her into this new thing. And then story number two is when Lazarus passes away, her brother Lazarus. You see Jesus show up 4 days later, and he uses some like strong language with Martha, but then with Mary, he just sits down and he weeps. Um, and to me, like I see Mary, she's obviously going through the hardest week of her life, trying to figure out how she could ever confront the world in the future without her brother. And I just see Jesus, before he stands up and starts calling dead things back to life, he sat down and grieved. And I think there's something, a really beautiful invitation there for single people, but for all of us to grieve, um, the sad parts of life and the scare that when things start to give us fear about the future and, well, how am I ever going to be able to do this, tomorrow? Um, I think Jesus really understands that fear, so much so that he sat down to weep. So that's the tomorrow section, and then finally the last one is when Mary goes and gets the anointing ointment, and she breaks open the jar, and it's this like really, it's like her most like prized possession, and I love it because she's anointing Jesus, and even I think it's Judas is in the back, just like we could have sold this, like and given it to the poor. What are we doing? And you see Jesus just affirming, no, she's allowing her most prized possession to be broken right here, right now. Uh, and to me, that's this beautiful invitation to be all in on today, to use the gifts that God has given you today, and to live this like exuberant, generous life today. And so, yeah, with those three interactions with Jesus, I just felt like telling her story would be really sweet, and so that starts to unfold throughout the book.
I love that. I loved especially that third story of the breaking of the alabaster box, because she was ostracized by everyone that was around that room. And if you think about it, not nowadays anymore, a woman that's older and is single is not nowadays, it's not seen as it was like 30, 40 years ago. But still, deep down inside, there are some thoughts of like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that I can relate to that. It's like, I had at 25 years old, a relationship of 4.5 years. I felt like I lost 4.5 years of my life, wasted it away. And it's like, what's wrong with me? That it doesn't work with anybody. And there's just all of that. And she pours out all of her inadequacy at Jesus' feet, all of her pain, all of her past, all of her really wishes for the future. She pours it out at his feet. And I think that's the invitation of the Savior for everyone, and for the single people as well, because like you said, some people are very content in being single, and some they struggle. You yourself said, maybe 82% of the time
Yeah,
you
I hear
were
you.
you were content and have, but there's that time where the longing is there, right? The desire is there. So we need to feel that love from Jesus, that acceptance, that pour down, into our hearts.
Yeah, that's right. That's so well said. That there's always an invitation, um, to give all of it to Jesus.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. I
and
love
you'll
that.
never regret. You'll like what the world called wasteful of what Mary was doing, she called worship.
Mm.
And yeah, I wonder if maybe there's somebody listening to this who it's like you need to go all in on Jesus and serving Jesus and loving Jesus today. The world may call that wasteful, but if you call that worship, you'll never regret it.
Amen. I love that. Well, this is something important. I think at the final part of your book that you talk about the danger of living on the kingdom of me. Talk
Mhm.
about that, and why is this such an essential concept for single
And
people?
well, it's so easy to make life about me. I've had one of those days. If I'm just being really, really honest, I've had one of those days where, for a number of reasons, um, I've I've been complaining internally. I've been mad at God. I've been just kind of having a bit of a pity party, making everything about me, and I am constantly reminded, um, that it's so funny. You read a book about something, and people are under like the false assumption that after you read the book, then you've got it down, and it's just not true, you know.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, I could write a book about that.
yeah, totally. So I've had one of those me days where it's all been about me, and I think it's really important to talk about that, especially for single people, because when you're a mom or a dad of like young kids, you don't have the luxury of making it all about you, because you have to make breakfasts, and you have to get them out the door, and like there's all of these things on your to-do list. And there's something really beautiful about that I think God designed it that way, to help us get outside of ourselves. And so single people, I always say, like, we need to just be more intentional about finding ways to make life about other people. That can be as simple as stopping right now and sending an encouraging text message to a friend where you go, "Hey, I love you. I'm praying for you. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you." Or whatever. Just finding a simple way to get your eyes off of yourself. Um, because uh life works a lot better when you're looking out and you're looking up. And sometimes I feel like it's really tempting for us single people to become like navel gazers, where we're just thinking about ourselves all of the time, and then wondering what's wrong. Man, sometimes the best antidote to that is just to go celebrate some other people.
Oh, I love that. It's so important for anyone, but of course, with singleness, right? When if you're single, that is probably more tempting thing because of the fact that you don't have other people that depend on you, right? So I
Totally.
love that you included that in the book.
Mhm.
So important, and I
Thank you.
think we are our society in general, not just singles. We are so caught up with ourselves. Me and my four.
Yeah,
Me and my little,
totally.
even us married people, me and my three or me and my four, people in my
Yeah.
life. And it's just like in Jesus, he invites us to serve, to love, to give, to get out of our whatever bubble we live in.
I've never finished a day where I was just serving others, whether it's like a serve project or just intentionally doing something, thinking, man, I really wasted this day. You know, like you get to the end of that day and you're like, that was amazing. Why don't I do this more?
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you finish some days where you're just like, oh, you just feel sorry about yourself and in the couch stuffing your pie hole with pie and other stuff. And you finish that day.
Totally.
This day sucked, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's
It's
so
so
important. It's our flesh doesn't want that to be true. Our flesh just wants to think about ourselves. But the
that's right.
spirit comes alive when you dedicate your life to showing other people the love of God.
I love that. Well, this is such a great conversation, Ryan. I love it, but we're getting to the end of our time together. But I wanted to ask you the final chapter of your book. It's called "Flip the Script on Singleness."
Mm.
So what does that mean? How do we do that? How do people see single
Yeah.
people do that? And I want you to finish by giving an encouragement
Yeah.
to someone out there who needs the encouragement that single today will bring.
Yeah, I would love to. Um, I have noticed that there is a script in the church for single people. At least historically, it was always like, hurry up and get married. What are you waiting for? And then there was a script in the world that was just like hookup culture and hook up and hang out and have fun and don't worry about it. And neither of those scripts really worked for me. And I realized early on that when um, the script also doesn't line up with scripture, you have an invitation to flip the script. And so for me, um, I talk all about in that last chapter, simple ways to flip that script and find a third way to be single, um, which is really just trying to be single like Jesus was single. And so things like, instead of coping with the disadvantages of being single, let's take advantage of the advantages of being single. Instead of trying to control our singleness, let's surrender it. Instead of waiting for permission, this is a big one for somebody. We don't like to make decisions as humans, and oftentimes single people get paralyzed because you don't have somebody else in your corner that you're making the decision with. And so you're like, oh, I want to go on that trip, or I want to do that, pursue that new job career, I want to start that new ministry, but like, I'll just kind of wait maybe. And once I'm married, then we'll do it. And I think that there's permission to go, what if today you started taking steps and you started owning some of your decisions in life, and you stopped waiting for permission and you realize that permission is granted. I tell a story about my good friend Janelle, who, since I've known her, two desires: always wanted to be married and always wanted to be a foster mother. And so far, the first one hasn't happened, um, although it's something that she pursues. Um, but a couple years ago, she realized, like, I don't have to wait for the first one in order to do the second one. And so for years now, she's been a foster mother to multiple kids, and it's
Oh,
harder,
wonderful.
and like she has to rely
Yes.
on her community and all of that. But it's like she didn't wait until she was married to start
Yeah.
stepping into what God has for her. And so I think my encouragement to the person listening is, today is a new day. His grace and his mercy is made new today. This is the day the Lord has made. You have a chance to rejoice and be glad in it by doubling down on whatever season of life you are in. And so if you are married, man, double down on your marriage and make it the best marriage ever. If you are single, double down on your singleness and make it the best singleness ever. And you do that not by sitting around waiting for permission, but by making some decisions, being proactive, and getting your eyes off of yourself and onto other people. Find an easy way to serve, find an easy way to love. Everybody needs encouragement. So just find somebody to encourage today. And then you watch how, that stagnant water in your soul starts to stir, and you start to come alive and experience that abundant life in ways you never thought possible.
Oh, I love it. But what a wonderful word for married and single people out there. I love the way we finished this conversation, and definitely. And you know what? You and I have something in common. I have a friend too. You have yours is Janelle.
Mhm.
Mine starts with a J, Judy. She'll be here. She'll be listening to this, and she was the same thing. She wanted to foster, and she actually just fostered three little girls. And yeah,
Shout out to Judy.
she's
That's
single
amazing.
as well. Yes, amazing woman of God. She
Let's
really
go,
is.
Judy.
And so, anyway, wonderful conversation. Ryan is giving a copy of his book for someone in my audience. So just go to my show notes and fill out the form for a chance to win single today. Ryan, what a wonderful conversation. Godspeed to you. And may he give you the desires of your heart, whatever they are.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a true joy.
It was to me too. God bless you.